All right, welcome back. Realize that it's been 2 years since episode 3. I think we're on episode maybe 4 or 5. Um, but at any rate, welcome back to Convos. This is the Drill Team Dynamics podcast where we talk about drill team stuff. And today, I kind of feel uniquely qualified to introduce this topic because I used to be a middle school English teacher. And I used to have the, right around this time, actually, the joy of dealing with, but can I please turn this in? No, that was 3 months ago, but I need to pass for my concert. I'm so sorry. Maybe we should have done anything up until this point. And so the conversation we're having today is about grades, because this is probably the number one issue that plagues every team everywhere. I don't know that we've ever been, and very rarely have we ever been somewhere and there not be some kind of issue with students either struggling with their classes and kind of it being a scary thing before, the competitions kick in, or where key people are falling off the roster because of grade related issues. And, I think that we have a very good suggestion for every team, regardless of competitive level or experience or where your school is located. Um, but I think a lot of times that people think we're crazy and people think that, oh, well, it must be something special that you guys did. I don't think it could work for us. And so today we're here to talk about what can we do about grades. And I really do think this can be something that would be beneficial for every drill team. So whether you're an instructor listening to this or whether you're a cadet on a team, we're going to give you some good suggestions of things that you can do. We're going to tell some stories about how this has been successful in the past, and we're going to unpack what's really behind the phenomenon of drill team and grade issues. So I guess to start off with, maybe at a 10,000 foot view, how should we be thinking about the issue of grades and the issue of student academic performance on the teams?
Well, we've been talking about the grade thing. I mean, we've been doing this for 12 years, so we've been talking about grades for 12 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And like to start with, we would, the general thing of you guys are a team. You shouldn't be doing your grades alone. You have someone on the team who's an expert in every subject. And so if you know that you have someone on the team who's failing, then they should either go to you or you should seek them out. We've recommended things like when you get towards like EOCs or your 6 weeks testing or whatever type of testing is, like, maybe for one of your practices, don't practice, but make it a study hall. And we have suggested a plethora of things along that line at this point, and none of but one, I think people don't think about it, and so nobody does it.
Well, it's also awkward.
It is. And so so like nothing made a difference. And then we started coaching and we told them that same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we weren't there all the time. It was only semi regularly when we were home. But again, that didn't change anything either, even like when we were at a school more regularly.
Well, and I think that all comes from the idea that any of that is the students being proactive. It's the students going and finding more time that they somehow have somewhere to study more, to be more involved with literally the act of teaching themselves and studying material, which, quite frankly, should be happening while they're in school to begin with. And they should be supplementary additional stuff that's happening outside of practice.
And
But nobody likes that.
how many times have we suggested to instructors, well, the solution is to micromanage the team. You have to print out grade reports every day, and then you need to throw them in their faces and threaten them in order to get their grades up, or they have to go to their classes and have their teachers list their assignments and sign them and bring them back. And it just becomes an instructor task
Well,
to manage the grades.
you were just saying that. I was thinking about it is like, because we're when we talk about like inspection, is we always, every school's got a packet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then only the students who are going to study the packet study the packet.
Exactly.
You know what? You were just talking about that, and I think realistically, like, yeah, that is one way where you could solve it, where the instructor is watching the grades for the students, but that
You-
becomes one more thing for the instructor to do on top of their job because they are teachers.
Well, and I'm going to say something controversial because I think the statute of limitations has expired. Most of the instructors who were doing that in the heyday of competitive drill were not teaching class. They could sit around and pull grade reports in third period
Yep.
because the students were sitting there and using it as a second study hall
Yep.
or drilling if they were on the drill team.
Which, also, side note, we got extra study time because our JRTC classes were never drill. So
Sure.
our study time was also whenever we needed it to be during
Sure.
school.
I think that some people have tried that. And I think we get a lot of pushback from instructors saying, well, why would I do that?
Why is it your job?
They should be responsible for themselves. They're almost adults at this point. If they have figured out now, I'm not going to do it for them.
Why do we have to handhold all the way through it?
So I think that suggestion hasn't also been met with a lot of success overall.
Rightfully so, honestly, because it's a lot of just extra work for the instructor.
And instructors have, I mean, I've talked to a lot of them, and there has been that prevailing idea of like, well, if they haven't figured it out by now, then what they need is more accountability. And I think the experiences that we've had recently would kind of push back on the idea that it's because the student is lazy or because the student doesn't want to be academically successful. Like the team members are for some reason purposely being like, and maybe maliciously not doing their assignments or not paying attention to their deadlines and not turning their homework in and that kind of thing. So can you kind of speak to where we see and what our experiences have been working with students and how they actually feel about why they struggle with grades?
One, and this has been universal even before we got to what we're going to talk about, is the majority of the reason that students fail classes is one, they don't turn in work.
Yep.
And oftentimes I think as many times as they don't do the work is they've done the work and then literally had it in the bottom of their backpack and not turned it in.
And just to lend some credibility to that, as a former middle school English teacher, the number of times I would speak with a student after class who was struggling and missing assignments, only to open their backpack and discover that most of them were done, mostly done, or actually complete because we did them in class and there was enough time in class to get it done and they did finish it and they just didn't turn it in or bring it in when they were supposed to is definitely a thing.
And then it's embarrassing, right? If you were supposed to turn it in, even if you have it done, oh, well, you don't want to be the one. It's easier to just be like, oh, I didn't do it than to, you had it done. Why didn't you turn it in? I forgot. Well, that's embarrassing.
Well, and so then it's not turning in or forgetting when like a test is coming up and therefore not studying for it and not being prepared for it and then being surprised even though they, it was maybe in a syllabus or maybe they were told about it.
Well, it's just not allocating the right brain space to figuring that out.
And so I think we've very, very, very few of the students who we have encountered who are failing or when we go to like programs and like instructors like talk about it is because they just straight up don't understand the material.
Well, again,
or that they want to fail.
I can speak to this so that this doesn't sound like these outside drill team consultants who do nothing but run around the country playing drill team all the time. I don't know that I can name a single student in my years in the classroom who failed because they did not understand the content, because the ones who did not understand the content were provided the resources or afforded the space to understand the content. Failure typically doesn't come in that form, or at least not in my experience. Like I haven't seen a lot of, oh, I didn't know what a preposition was and I could not figure that out and therefore I could not meet that standard on the end, the final exam.
And I think that's why, coming back to why the initial suggestions of like, oh, you guys, should study as a team. If you've got someone who's really good at a topic, go work with them. They were all good suggestions for people that want to score higher values. We're talking about people going from like B to an A because that's the people that are going to search that out. It's not actually a lack of understanding because those people Anybody that doesn't understand is probably already doing something to get extra help because they genuinely didn't understand. They probably aren't doing a sport.
Yeah, yeah. All the things we were suggesting, like drill team study hall, like putting up a list of people who are experts, those aren't intervention strategies to stop the failure. They're intervention strategies to win more. It's a better mousetrap. It'll help people out. It'll help the ones who feel like, they're academically strong, but maybe they're getting behind
Yep.
and they're already predisposed to doing those things.
Yep.
So then I guess, can you talk about, very briefly, for those who are legitimately academically struggling with the content, i.e., it was me my senior year. I had to go into lunch tutorials every day I was in sophomore level geometry. I wound up being an English teacher. I went in every single day my second semester because I legitimately did not understand the math content that we were doing. And I wish I could go back in time and thank my senior year English teacher for sitting down with a senior in high school every day and explaining plane geometry.
Your math teacher?
Yes.
Let's say, no, you're English teacher.
Because I was legitimately struggling with the content. And so then,
Yeah.
so for those who are legitimately struggling as I legitimately struggled, what for those students should they be thinking about doing, or how should they be approaching their issue before we dive into the majority of folks who are really struggling with something outside of the actual content itself?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think in that case, that would be tutorials and, going to that teacher and asking what extra resources they might have because a lot of times is you just need more time with
digest it.
the material.
Mhm.
Is it might be that whatever you're doing in class is just not enough time. Like, again, I'm also an English major, and I like math, but my problem with math is I just miss like details.
Mm.
And so, like, when I was in college, and I was taking, like, again, I took really easy math classes.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, is I found that the more time I got to spend with the material, the better I did with the material. So one is, make sure ask your teacher what other resources they might have.
Yep.
And then I think two is, I would say that at this point, do go to your teammates, maybe who are older than you or who have been there, because I know, when I was in high school is some of the times when we were able to help our teammates, it's because they just didn't understand the way the teacher was explaining it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think for me on that exact trend, the biggest advice that I have, and mine actually comes from taking the college classes, not as much in high school, because for us, the advice we gave about, work with your teammates, spend time doing homework together, we actually did that.
That's what we did with our teammates to help.
Right.
And
So I think a couple other things that I learned that were really helpful in going through like high level engineering calculus for me in college, which I did not have any desire to ever do, but was required for my major.
I'm not sure I'm qualified to hear the title of that class.
It's not pleasant. I didn't enjoy it. I had no future in math. Like, I don't know why, but anything science related requires it. So I had to learn totally new studying strategies because I had never struggled with math before that.
Right.
And this was a different version. And I found that there were two things that were majorly helpful. One, and this kind of comes back to finding teammates, right, is having either videos. Like, honestly, there are a lot of professors from different colleges, which applies down to high school level math and stuff like that. Or not just math, but anything.
English.
Yeah. There are a lot of professors that will post their videos up on YouTube, and it's just another way of hearing similar material. So maybe you can hear it from a perspective that finally clicks, or you just needed that example to really lock in the information. So it's finding different ways of hearing the same material. And then the other thing that I thought was really helpful for me is I always find it really tedious to just sit down and study something over and over and over again. Like, repetition drives me insane, but it's also a very needed tool for a lot of information. There are just things you have to memorize. And I found that teaching somebody else those same memorizations was actually more useful. So like teaching a younger sibling or teaching a friend the same material, but not actually like just regurgitating it, trying to teach it to them, because it will force your brain to make the pathways for your own understanding. So I think that's also why the whole find a teammate thing works both ways, is the person teaching it will develop a deeper understanding. So I found that worked a lot with material I didn't really understand. If I had to figure out how to explain it to somebody else, it allowed me to go deeper into the material for a reason, and it didn't just seem like a waste of my time.
Well, I think, yeah,
Pardon.
I think that, and again, I feel comfortable saying this. Um, Teachers are overworked, and they're trying to teach whatever 30 different students in their class the same material, while 3 to 4 of them are distracting the class, and 2 or 3 of them are really paying attention. And no one, I don't think, I hope no teachers walk into school and say, today I'm going to do a bad job teaching my classes, and my students aren't going to understand me. But what I will say is, it might be that you are not predisposed to receiving that information from that teacher in the environment or the way, and that's fine. And I think that goes to the next point, that my piece of advice as a former teacher would be, if you are that drill team cadet that is struggling, or if you're an instructor and you see that happening, is to encourage those ones who are legitimately struggling with the knowledge and the content, the actual material,
Yeah.
is to go at it from the standpoint of forming a relationship to the teacher.
Yes.
Not necessarily going to get going to get information or going to get knowledge, but building a relationship, even in just saying hi every day, even in just making eye contact when you walk in, and ask how that teacher's day is going, is start to build that relationship so that you feel more comfortable
Mm.
when you don't understand something, either putting your hand up or going to them during tutorials or during study hall or whatever you guys call it at your school.
Yep.
I think a lot of the times the students who struggled did feel that shame, but didn't have the relationship with that teacher to go and say, hey, I'm actually having a hard time here. But if you build that relationship, you are more likely to be able to open up about, hey, I actually need some help in math or whatever. The only reason I felt comfortable going to my teacher my senior year, which was really embarrassing for me, to be honest, now that I'm thinking back on it, was because she was very, like, nice, and we had a good relationship in a class. And that allowed me to feel comfortable to go to her and say, hey, I need some more help outside of class.
Yeah, because
So,
you're not going to ask a random stranger to help
No,
you.
no.
That's uncomfortable.
and that's going to be super
Also,
awkward.
that's a really good point in general because, like, while we didn't have a lot of struggles when we were in school ourselves, like, we competed a lot.
Yeah.
And because, like, and so it would have been really easy for us to get behind.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
we missed,
Especially anybody taking AP classes or trying to do dual credit. Anybody taking higher than average workloads, especially.
the only reason we made it through, especially our senior year, because we competed a lot that year, was because we did have really good relationships with our teachers, and they let us, and they gave us leeway with, like, turning in assignments later, or, like, giving us extra help, or, like,
Well, and that
people who,
was very intentional on our part because we knew for a fact some of the teachers that we were going to be working with in our classes, it had been known that they didn't like having ROTC drill team cadets or JROTC drill team cadets because they would constantly miss and not do their work.
yeah.
And so we very intentionally, our senior year, made sure that our teachers liked us
Yeah.
by just interacting with them, saying hi. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It can be very simple because teachers teach a lot of students and get looked over all day.
Plus, if you were just kind,
Just making eye contact while they teach.
Well, the super hack is, like, if I know who you are more than the 50 minutes or 90 minutes that you're sitting in a desk not looking at me while I'm teaching, when you do need a favor or when something is on the line, and I can say this now, again, statute of limitations being far expired, is like, teachers absolutely have favorites. And teachers absolutely will go out of their way to help the students that have shown a desire to build that relationship, and not to say go suck up for the, not because if you're sucking up for you, it's going to be easy to spot that as trying to be manipulative. But if you're genuinely, like conversive and participatory in class, and, like, make an effort to interact in a positive way,
Yep.
you might get that leeway that another student does not, just because they don't know that the familiarity isn't there. So, that I think that speaks a lot to maybe those who are struggling legitimately with the content of the thing.
Yep.
But that only accounts for, like we said, a small percentage of the students who are failing drill team, who are winding up on the cut list, right? But, at the 6-week mark, right before the big drill meets. And then all of a sudden you have to reconfigure your entire platoon, or you have to redo the X because you lost all 4 of your key spinners or whatever just happened.
yeah.
So can we transition into what every drill team should be doing as a as just a part of being on the team? The grass is green, the sky is blue, practices on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. we draw rifles, we go to the drill deck, we set it up, and we do this. And this is the one thing that, out of all the things that we have experimented with, is the only thing that has been successful. And
Clear manner too.
and with such obvious results, can we dive into what every team should be doing to make sure that they have those guardrails up for the grade issue?
Yeah, so, and I don't know why we didn't realize this sooner.
Considering we were both people that already did it.
Well, because like when you go into college, they usually usually give you a free planner.
Yeah, almost always. I don't know of any that don't. And even if they don't give it to you right off the bat, they'll tell you where to go find one at your academic success office.
But what we, in that second year that we were coaching, it was leading up into Marine Corps Nationals. And I think technically everybody was eligible, but right after Marine Corps Nationals was the deadline so that people, if they weren't passing by then, would be ineligible.
And then that 6-week period would have taken us all the way out to the end of the school year.
So there was the no recovery.
Yeah, there was no aid buyback.
We had multiple people who would not have been eligible or who were very much...
They were on the cusp. Yeah.
On the cusp, and the reason why was because they were not turning in assignments. I don't think that year that anyone was failing because they did not understand the information.
No.
It was just because they...
Missing work, poor quiz grades, poor test grades. Not for a want of understanding what the material was asking them.
No, they just forgot they had a test.
It just, yeah.
And so I think we were at our wits' end and we were like, okay, we have to do something different.
Yeah.
And so we decided that every single person on the team was going to be required to keep and maintain a planner in some way, shape, or form.
Now, when you say planner, talk a little bit about what constitutes a quote-unquote planner. Do they all have to go out and buy and bedazzle their own stuff? Do they have? Is it digital?
They need, the minimum is a piece of paper that says Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
And the best part about that minimum is it can literally be notebook paper that has Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday written on the top.
So we're not talking about having this isn't like a rich school thing where everyone goes to Office Depot and buys a special planner, or we're talking about the bare minimum being piece of paper that has days on it.
Well, and there are even some students that their thing, and specifically speaking about that time frame right there, that they had been kind of throwing around the idea of using it digitally. So some students even literally just had this set up as like their Google Calendar, and they would just have for the week the events listed of what they were going to have accomplished in that time frame. So no, we're talking literally anything counts as a planner. A planner is just an organized form of information.
Okay, so then they get the planner or the piece of notebook paper, or they are a high-speed, high-motivated person. They go out and get one decorated, or they get it on their iPad if they're one of those kind of people.
So when we initially did this, we said, okay, everybody's going to do this. And then they all had one, but in that first couple of weeks, because we did this right before.
Well, the initial actual, and this is not something I would suggest to any instructor, this is because we're nerds and this is what we do, is the initial was that I had everybody's planner on my thing. So we built out a planner with me, and they had to account with me for everything.
Sorry, stop though. The reason we ended up doing that is because when we told them that,
they didn't have one.
They didn't have one, or some of them basically were like, we don't even know how to use this.
Yeah. It was literally it was a financial thing of, we don't know where to go buy them or spend the money on buying them. It was, I don't even know what a planner looks like. It was just, basically, we wanted to take out all of the factors that could prevent it at the time, which is why that was the initial just fix it.
Well, and so I say Matt and I didn't do this because I don't know if we flew in.
I was on the bus.
Well, right, because we didn't travel with the team, but
nope, I did.
But Cheeto did, and she was gracious enough.
Spent the entire 14-hour bus ride doing this,
sitting down with every single student on the team. And then, so what was that? Well, this is where we discovered a lot of this stuff. And what was it?
What did you learn when you were interviewing the cadets you were coaching through this process, what did you learn as you were having those conversations?
Yeah, so the biggest thing, and it kind of was what guided a little bit of what we were asking of them after this process, was just the fact that people had no idea when things were coming up. So we were in the final leg of school, and the only thing that people could just tell me right off the bat of like, okay, before we even do this, they were going to come up and they were going to sit basically across from me, and we were going to be able to talk through all of the different classes, what big events were coming up. Because initially when we did this, it was, what are your biggest projects that are left? Because we're at the end of the school year. Surely there's not much else left, right? And it was like, okay, when you come up to chat with me, you're going to know every subject's major projects that are left. And the only students that could tell me that were the ones that already had planners, the ones that were already doing these things, the ones that also had no issues with classes, they weren't failing, that none of that was happening. So when they would come up, it would be, okay, here's my planner, I've got this set up, this set up. Awesome, moving on.
So wait, before we go any further, this is everyone on the team does this, even if they're not struggling with grades.
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah, this was every single person is checking in so that we would know when we were going to remind people or check in with them on what was coming up due. Because what I essentially made at the time was a master list of every major project from every student, so that we could just be tracking of when they were turning that stuff in. Because clearly at that point, them having to have already been on top of this themselves was not the answer. At that point, we took out the, well, they should have, oh, this should be done. Should didn't exist. We were just going to assist with what was happening. And the thing that people didn't know, they didn't know when their big stuff was coming up. And the one thing that I will also give credit to the students on this front, and am no way blaming the teachers for this because teachers have a lot going on, but for some of them, they couldn't know what was coming up because their teachers didn't have it on their syllabus from the get-go. Like, some of these details were literally just TBDs according to the teachers because they had so much else going on.
So when you ran into that and it turned out that the teachers hadn't published what was coming up next,
Yeah.
were the students aware that they could ask their teachers?
And so that was the next thing, is it became, all right, well, we're sitting here and we're reacting to not knowing when big assignments are due, which nobody could tell me until they were forced to go look it up. So people didn't just know this information off the top of their head. And then it was, okay, if you are not sure, your teacher has not updated the, eCampus or whatever online version of that exists, it was, go ahead and email your professor or your teacher, not professor, and check in with them on if they happen to know when this might be coming up. Just check in on where you are and where they are. And most of them actually got responses back by the time we were done being on the bus.
And that's so cool because I think you talk about skills that will follow you out of high school. Knowing that you could ask your teacher for more information.
And even though they have the syllabus, some of them didn't even
They didn't even know how to find the syllabus for some of them.
right. Like some of them didn't even know how to contact.
No.
So before we go any further, because you mentioned this, and I want to stick on this a little bit for a second. You said, because this was at the end of the season, and we realized, the instructors had realized that there were a lot of people on the bubble, like
Yeah.
C, teetering between C and D territory, could fail off the team. So this is you coming in here is a major intervention to make it happen. From which we learned how to implement what we're going to continue to talk about. But let me just stop and ask about the whole idea of like, well, we threw the idea of they should have known better, they should have done better. We threw that out the window because I think I in talking with instructors in particular, right? I think that, like Kirsten mentioned earlier, there is this idea of like, well, they should know by now because they're 18 years old, because they're 17 years old, because they're 16 years old, because they're 15 years old, because they're out of junior high and they're in high school now. There's this idea that they should know how to do these things. And you're telling me, and again, we were on a plane flying back and forth. We didn't, I'm kind of hearing some of this for the very first time, is like, you're telling me that they didn't even know how to find their syllabus. So like, what would you say to an instructor maybe out there who says, well, they should have already figured this out and it's not my job to help them figure this out because they should already know? How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think that's something that guides a lot of what we do, is taking away the should concept from pretty much every decision. And I think this is one of the biggest times where it really felt so intentional and obvious in terms of even my own like mental space about it, because I am someone that's always been a planner person. I'm someone that has, always tried to be on top of different things like that. So it, to me, a should is so obvious here. What do you mean you don't know how to look up a syllabus? What do you mean you don't know you have a test coming up the Tuesday we get back, and by the way, it's Monday?
And your teacher told you, you're telling me your teacher must have said that every single day.
Right.
leading up to
Well,
lesson.
and
Well,
I
how did
know
you
they
forget
did,
that?
because the same student that was like, yeah, I have a test on Tuesday. And I'm like, did you study it all this weekend? And they're like, no, my teacher did say that they sent me extra materials though. Oh, so you mean your teacher went above and beyond and you still forgot? Like, what do you mean? And they're like, yeah, I just had so much going on. And it was like, okay, clearly should didn't matter. You should have remembered that. You should have known better. And I think ultimately, at least speaking on how I feel personally about the should term, is it's just, or what it feels like is kind of a laziness on my side. If I don't help a student because they should have known better, that's because I just don't want to have to put the extra work in. And it doesn't cost me anything to just care a little bit more, to just put a little bit of extra time. Which is again also why I made the caveat of like, I don't expect instructors to sit there on a bus for 15 hours and do this with their student. Um, but if someone was going to do any of these things, if a student was going to already know all of these details, they would have. Nobody liked to look me in the face and be like, I have no idea how to even email my instructors. I don't even know how to send a proper email. I like how do I even open it? What is a professional term? How do I email my teacher? What does that sound like? Nobody wants to ask those questions and admit that they don't know, because I think every adult, and what we're all told, even about adult things now in life, is like, oh, well, you should have known better. Well, I didn't. So what are we going to do to fix the fact that the should already didn't happen? And I think that's the big guiding factor for me is if they would have or could have, then that's what would have happened. So for me, it kind of just comes back to that idea of, in this case, should doesn't matter because they would have fixed it by now if it was within the wheelhouse of something they could fix on their own.
Yeah, I think, and that goes into a lot of stuff that we do with the training, and I think that really touches on the idea of like, we tell the teams all the time, remember for your teammates, nobody woke up this morning and said, today I'm going to make practice miserable and just suck. No one came to practice and said, today I'm going to dirt out, for 60 minutes and cause my commander a headache because I can't do anything right. Nobody woke up and did it, and yet sometimes I think it's easy to look at these failings of preparedness and say, well, you must have done it on purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and it must be somehow malicious, and it must be somehow personal. And I think one of the things that I learned very early on as a teacher is exactly that, is no one is no one. I don't think anyone
Any
is
examples?
trying to do this on purpose, maliciously, just to let the team down and fail off the team because they're a squad leader and they know the team needs them, and they're going to do it on purpose to fail off.
I think maybe it also helps to view these young people as people. I think a lot of times children get looked at as like things or like possessions or objects like that we move around and that, are under the control of like the adults, and they get kind of like, I mean, almost like toys or like inanimate basically, like.
Mm.
And so I think it's a lot of times as you look and like you get frustrated with them because, they're their inexperience means that they make worse decisions, or they haven't had exposure to this or that, and so those things that they should
Mm-hmm.
know, like, it's just easy to look at them and be upset with them. But like, for me, it always helps to remember like those are people, and like they're living their lives, and like their lives at 13, 14, 15, all the way through 18 are just as like whatever you're feeling at 30 or 40 or 50 years old.
It's just as valid.
Because like I don't today at 31 feel like my emotions are any less valid than whenever I was in high school.
I also don't feel like any of the shoulds that we have now as adults are any different. It's higher, like negatives, if we didn't do something we should have known by now, my reaction to not knowing something is not any different.
But that's what I mean, and so I think part of it is it's really easy to look at them and forget that they're people and not, like it's easy to look at them as kids and, like, write them off because they're doing kid things or they're dumb or they're, you know, that they're
Mm-hmm.
everyone their generation is ruining whatever.
They're lazy.
It's easy to look but forget that, like, you were there once, and when you were there is, like, those emotions that you were feeling then are probably not that different than your emotions that you feel now when you're encountering things.
Well, and I think it really comes down to this prevailing idea that every new generation, so not necessarily this one is special for being extra this, every generation below the current generation is lesser in some form or fashion, right? We all go through the phase. Okay, cool. And I think it's like the idea that, oh, well, they're just being lazy. So if we don't inherently believe they're stupid, which I don't think most people are inherently believing people are stupid. Hopefully. But let's move one beyond that is, okay, well, if they're not stupid and that's why they didn't know it any better,
Then
well,
they
they
must
just
be
didn't want
lazy.
to.
They must
They
be
were
lazy.
lazy. And it's like, but you don't know that. And what do you actually have to prove that? Have you tried to do other things with them to prove that that's not a laziness? Because we're just assuming that if people don't do things, it's because they're lazy. And I think that that's just an odd assumption.
And, you know, and I think the school systems, especially today, are just overwhelmed, and I think it's really easy to miss things. And so far in working with the students the way we do, we never have problems with the students that instructors have problems with when they tell us to look out for certain things. Those things don't appear as in our experience, we have not found anybody who's stupid or lazy or whatever. They just needed when given better information with the right structure, they usually
Yeah, it's
thrive and flourish.
it's and I think this is an example because we're about to talk about then what was the remedy once you discovered all these things. If the answer is not more information, then the answer is more structure. And if the answer is not more structure, the answer is a better relationship. And I think that all the strong teachers, I think everyone remembers a good teacher in their lives who knew how to provide one of those things when it was needed to get you to that next level. And drill team then can be a place where they are getting that, where they're maybe not getting that in their overwhelmed core content areas because there's just so much going on. So then so now we know they're not sure in many cases what's coming up next.
Yep.
They're learning that they can reach out to their teachers when maybe their teachers don't even know what the next things are.
Yep.
They're building that relationship to where the teachers are sending things back to them and things are now moving this direction. So then what is the process or what then came out of it that became the standard of how the team was going to use these planners on a regular basis? How did that then evolve out of those conversations you had?
Well, and I think that's where the next step was essentially we realized from that conversation and basically having that bus ride of like, okay, so most of these students are not failing because they don't know things. It's because they don't know what's coming next for themselves. And I think that's where we kind of all sat down and were like, okay, so planners, what if that wasn't an us thing? What if it was a them thing? And I want to say that's where we moved into the next year of coaching, starting from the baseline of them.
Well, because we did
doing
have,
that now.
the end of that second year was tough, and we did have people that weren't eligible at various points in the year. Now, I think most people got safe at the end
Because
because of that intervention.
correct. I want to say that we kept all of the key
But
players.
but going
year.
but going back to the idea that it can't be an instructor or an adult-centric process, and that really was because you need to keep your key players eligible on a high-performing team.
Yeah.
Then going into the next year, knowing that this has been an issue, and we say it was an issue on this team, but I have never, prior to what we're about to talk about, I've never
Not.
coached, been around, or seen a top-level team, let alone a not top-level team, where the grades weren't an issue. Right? So this is not like we're not telling the story of one drill team in that regard. We're telling the story of literally every team that I think has ever existed, maybe of all time.
Right.
So then going into that last year of coaching, when we knew this was going to be an issue, what was the standard and what should schools implement practically?
Okay, so the requirement was that everybody on the team needed to have a planner in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
You know, Walmart had really cheap ones, and
Yep.
I want to say the instructors maybe even went out and like bought a couple.
We've been with a couple of schools where we tell them this on day 2 of training, and on day 3 of training, the instructor walks back in with a bunch of,
Yep.
$150
Uh,
planners from Walmart.
some people went out and bought nice ones. I also went online and like found like a cheap one,
Yeah.
and I made an online version that anybody could basically print out.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of academic resources out there for free
Well,
too.
there are also a lot of different styles of planners, and that's a big thing is knowing like what you actually like to see, which I do know that coming off of the Marine Corps Nationals trip, some of the people that were planner users, even in just having this conversation, actually modified how they use their own planner.
So
So they can change that.
so they get their plan, they can experiment. Obviously, it can evolve as things go on. Once they have it, you talked about the minimum being Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. What did they put down in those plans?
All they had to do was write their assignments and their tests.
Well, and I want to say that when we first started, we took a practice. We took an entire actual practice that they were supposed to be doing. And I went down there and I walked everyone through how to use a planner. So it wasn't even just that they had to have a planner. We actually also talked them through what that bare minimum looked like of how to write out every single class. If you are a person that this is interesting for, is you could like color code for the class, you could color code for assignments. But at a minimum, it was clarifying what you had on each day in terms of assignments. It was clarifying what assignments were due. Is that a homework? Is that an essay? Is that a worksheet? Is that a test or a project? It was filling out those objects in the big calendar function. So like if you had the calendar and then you have the weeks, when we walked through it, it was fill that out first. Fill the biggest events you know,
And
if
really,
you know them.
the big calendar was the only thing that was required of them.
Yeah.
Beyond okay, so they're writing down their assignments, they're writing down their upcoming tests.
Yeah.
How then is this you fill out the planner, and if you don't do it, you're doing push-ups, and we're going to check your planners every day to make sure you're doing it? What was the accountability system that was implemented at the student level that kept this thing rolling as the year went on?
Well, in this case, we had technically 3 different levels of accountability. We had the student's own accountability because in this case, we had whatever communication form or method you use. For us, it was Discord at the time. There was a specific channel or place you're going to put the information that every student individually was responsible for sending in their weekly
Once a week.
planner.
So it's once a week they have to
Once
submit
a week.
a picture of that week.
And side note to that, don't be afraid to change what day of the week that was, because initially it was set for every Monday or no, it was set for every Friday. They were going to do it at the end of the week for the upcoming week. And then they realized their teachers wouldn't have different projects or stuff uploaded then. Some people didn't know.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, we'll move it to Sunday so that it's like setting you up for the next week and you'll have gotten all the way through the weekend. That also didn't work. And based on feedback from the team, it switched to Monday night. You will send in your planner for the week because you will have had the chance to go talk to all of your teachers if you need to.
Okay, so let's say the majority of the ones do that, and they send it in if they're using GroupMe or they're using Discord or
Any communication.
whatever it is, and then the commanders and the key leaders are ticking off and making sure that
So that's
people are
the
doing it.
secondary level, right? The secondary level is not the individual accountability. It's that whoever your accountability groups are, if it's your commanders, if that's fellow, people within your class year, that's
Junior.
whoever your accountability group is, within the team. That was the secondary check.
Those were assigned.
Yes.
Those aren't random.
So that was the secondary check. So those people would then follow up on that day saying, hey, direct message, direct face-to-face contact, where's your planner? Where's the stuff for it? Did you send in the picture? Do you have it physically in front of you? So I can take a picture and send it in for you. At this point, it was not just following up on them doing it. It was, okay, well, if you have it, let me send it in.
Well, and that's like the teamwork that you want to see in a drill team, right? You want to see
That's leadership.
the older ones taking accountability for the younger ones, and the ones who are strong, some were helping the ones who are maybe weaker in an area along. So then so they go to them, they say, hey, You haven't seen your plan or picture come in. They say, okay, and it's still a challenge for them. So what happens then if it's still a challenge? Because here's what I'm getting at. I want to stamp out the idea because I know that people will be like, well, we tried it for 1 week and no one did it, so it doesn't work.
Well, so this is my favorite part about it, right? So the tertiary, the third check, and this is actually an example that helps with the, well, what if you have students that just won't do it? Because you will. Well, you could. I won't say you will. You might not, but you could. You could have the student that says, it just doesn't work for me. I don't need that. Or it won't be helpful. And for that individual, and this is where it's now moved off of individual, it's now moved off of team-led, and has now moved into adult accountability.
So this would be the instructor or the coach.
Yep.
Or, instructors. There are plenty of people in your school who would love if they could help a specific extracurricular get on top of their grades and are probably nerds about playing that. They're in your counseling department. They're in your community. Maybe they're not embedded in the school, but there are people that come in to do things like Avid or to do other intervention stuff that would love to take on a special pet project with you. We have an instructor friend who has somebody in the community that does academic success and college readiness. And he said every year she would come in and give a planner seminar to my entire, cadet corps. And, it's kind of fallen off, but I bet she would do that for the drill team. I bet she would do that in a heartbeat. So like you have resources. It might not be you. If that's not you, that's fine. But there are resources. And I bet you can find someone who would partner in with you to do this next thing.
Well, and so I think the base assumption from the student when, I want to say the first time this happened, was that they were going to get punished. They were going to get yelled at. And they were basically just going to blow it off. So, like, legitimately, the expectation was, I'll just sit here and I'll get yelled at, and then I won't have to do it because I can just move on. But it wasn't that. The answer was, okay, so you didn't submit your picture. And this was something that I personally did, was walked up to that student, and right before we went out to practice, I said, sit down, here's your paper, here's your pencil, write it out. So, at that point, it was no longer, oh, well, I'll find time to do it. No, it was, you are not practicing until we get this done, but we're not gonna belabor practice. It'll take you all of 5 seconds to just sit down and write it out.
So there was no punishment for it. It was just
no
the quote unquote punishment was we're gonna do this where you're supervised.
Yep.
And where it's for sure going to happen, because the other alternative would be to sit there with a blank piece of paper and stare at the wall and do nothing.
And the second the blank paper was filled out, they took a picture, they uploaded it to the Discord, and I said, awesome, let's go have a great day of practice. We moved on, and that was it. It didn't become a belabored point. It wasn't
So you're saying
something
don't
negative.
PT them for not sending.
I am saying nothing should happen if they don't do it other than you encouraging them to do it.
The thing about if you decide to do the planners is that it's not optional.
No, if you don't do it,
You can't. So you're telling me that you can't exchange a punishment, or you can't exchange a butt chewing for not doing it.
No, yeah, this is not.
You can't buy your way out with a negative consequence.
It's to help them.
Correct.
Like the goal is to help them. And I think a defense mechanism for not knowing things is to not try to know things.
Correct.
And therefore to then just take the punishment for not knowing things because it's easier to do that. And so that it just, well, I don't know. It's too hard to know. I'll just get yelled at. We'll move on and I'll just keep not knowing.
Is
Yeah, it's very easy.
taking that option off the table completely by having an adult or some kind of accountability where they're physically going to sit down and do it in your presence. And let me ask you this. It wasn't like 20 students on the team that fell into that category.
It was
Onesies or twosies?
Well, here's the thing as well is that didn't fix it. That first time of having to have that child sit down in front of me and write it out, they then did it for a couple weeks. And then, like most things would be assumed, oh, now I've flown under the radar again. I'm sure that it doesn't actually matter. So then a couple weeks went by and we did the process again. And I want to say it took 3 times of me being like, no, I'm still going to do this. I promise you, I didn't forget about
So
it.
you didn't give up on them and then recommend the instructors kick them off the team?
Well, no, because it's just a matter of, for that student,
They can't figure their stuff out.
well, and here's the thing, and this is just like a deeper look on that. For that student, I'm not saying this is the case, but that might be the only time they get one-on-one adult attention actually holding them accountable that's not screaming at them. That might be the only time they get actual confirmation that someone cares enough to actually want to sit down and want them to do better in life?
So
And what if you could be that adult in their life?
So you have the planners, you have the bare minimum, really, we're talking bare minimum here for all of this. And you have those 3 levels of personal accountability, i.e., everyone sees that you're putting your planner in. If that fails, student level accountability to where the leaders or the people responsible go and check in with those people and go next to them. And then for those that are still needing that intervention, you got the adult level accountability.
Yep.
So then let's talk about the outcome of this process, because this is where I think people think, and I watch it happen because Kirsten explains this to every instructor and every school and every team that we go to, and I watch the reaction of, well, that's because you guys did it. That's because it was a you thing. And it's some sort of special magical fairy dust to have students fill out 5 days a week of what they need to do, as if that was like a drill team dynamics like special. So let's talk about what the outcome of this was, because once the system was rolling, it really kind of takes care of itself.
Mhm.
The first year ever on a high-performing, nationally competitive team that nobody has been academically ineligible.
Well, and that multiple students had jobs, had other things that they were doing. We're not just talking about they were busy with drill teams.
So I want to wrap this up and to put a bow on it. I want to talk about 2 different stories. Well, no, 3 different stories. One story, the first story, from the perspective of a parent on the team whose children were on the team, and then there was this was at a booster club meeting, and they spoke up in support of the team.
Yeah.
And the parents stood up, and even if you're a cadet and you're somehow still listening to this because you want to help your team become better, I want you to hear this, because every team also has a problem with recruiting and recruiting the right kind of people. And this will solve your recruiting challenges as well, because this parent stood up and said, listen, for the entirety of my child's academic career,
And
they
had a senior and a sophomore on the team.
they basically were told by multiple teachers they were beyond help, that they were going to not be successful, that they were that they didn't have what it took and had been blown off. And she, I don't know how much of that is true, but she felt like her children had been blown off until they got to the drill team, where finally they had friends who cared about their academic success, and they had a system in place that has caused them to come home and start to plan, and their grades have now come up, and now their teachers are praising them. And I can't believe how much, literally in tears, about how being on the drill team changed their child's academic life. Academics has really nothing to do with spinning a rifle or marching or slapping or what have you, but they were so grateful that they had, and it wasn't like these cadets weren't a part of other things, but the parent was like, this is the one place where
the senior was also part of orchestra.
something like that, some other club. And
Yep.
this was the place where they finally got that support. So that's from the parent side, right? And if you have parents that want to put their students on your team, whether you're an instructor or whether you're a cadet, everyone's going to benefit from that. The second story is on both ends of the spectrum, to the point about the one who was a little bit reluctant, right? So we're getting to the end of the school year, and we've gone through this process, and they're still not about it. They're like, this is dumb. I'm doing it because I have to do. You're gonna
It's
say
not helping me.
it's not. So it's like, we're like, okay,
But they
so
were doing it at that
they were doing it. It's like, well, it's not helpful. I'm just doing it, but it doesn't help me. And we're like, hey, about this time last year, were you failing? And the student was like, well, yeah. And we were like, but now you're passing and you're not in danger of failing as we get into the last competition. He goes, no, I'm passing and I'm not in danger. It's like, but it's not helping you. No, it's not helping me at all. Okay, roger that.
And that season, they had more stuff required from them over the weekends because they competed more often. So a higher demand year all the way around. No, you're not failing this stuff.
So like, all that to say is like, it might not be helping you, and you might not even realize that it actually is helping you, and not to take it at face value when somebody tells you that it's not helping them, because clearly it was helping. And I think the last thing that I want to do is I want to read from someone from the opposite end of the spectrum. This is a graduate from the same team. This is somebody who was already extremely well. They were a commander. They were extremely well organized. They considered themselves academically successful. They were doing outside internships and things beyond just being on a nationally competitive drill team. And now they are in school, in college, and still successful. And I think it would be a good way to close this out by sharing what their testimony was And keeping in mind that this particular student was already somewhat organized and already thought themselves to be a pretty solid student. So they said, I'll say my piece and move on to somebody who has been on both sides and has now graduated with these skills. They said the planners are worth it. I had a 3.7 GPA, stressed on a majority of assignments, and was a student who panicked at a B. No joke. I always thought it was quote unquote dumb that other students or cadets couldn't just do it. What I didn't realize was that I didn't actually have the skills to get good grades. I was just constantly in an anxious state and was luckily smart enough to get the grades. Adding the planners not only helped the team in staying in for attendance, but personally it helped me in actually visualizing the assignments and knowing the dates when I had to space things out to complete assignments on time, etc. I'm literally in college now and still use my planner to plan out everything. I still struggle with time management and being disciplined enough to actually do the work, because let's face it, part of the equation is the discipline to do the work and do it well. But the planner puts me in a routine at the very least. So even if I don't get the work done early, I get it done on time, which means I'm not failing.
Because planners make space.
And then she said, rant over, had to cook there real quick. And so I guess in closing, that is our recommendation.
I mean, the biggest thing with the planners, if you're going to make it be successful, and this is going to be, I think this is the challenge on the adult side, is the goal is to remove the fear of failure from the students, because the reason why they don't know better, though they should know better, is because somewhere along the way they were shamed for not knowing better, and therefore they didn't get the help. And then nobody, instead of saying they should have known better, said they don't know better, how can we get them to know better?
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing for the adults to make this successful is you have to go, like we talked about before, about the unconditional positive regard, is you have to assume that it's not a failing on their part, but somebody failed them at some point along the way. And if they don't know, then it's because they don't know and they need somebody to help them.
And they might also be of the mindset that this won't help them. And sometimes you have to help people realize that they don't always know exactly what is best for themselves based on the information they have, because they just don't have enough yet.
Because they're young and you have more experience than they do. But again, kindness.
Yes. Planners make space. Space means you have actual room to make decisions, react to things, and it doesn't overwhelm everything else in your life, which normally the thing that gets overwhelmed first is grades.
Well, and on that note, hopefully we don't put another 2 years of space between episodes or whatever it was. Hopefully this was helpful. Again, if you're an instructor listening to this, or you're a cadet listening to this, hopefully you could take something away to implement with your team that will help them negate or even just make better the grade issue. As always, you can find us online, jrotcdrillteamtraining.com. Find us on Instagram at Drill Team Dynamics. And definitely check out our YouTube, where this will be posted for other videos, resources, etc., etc. Check out drillpedia.net for instructional videos and articles and so on and so forth, and the Global Drill Team Challenge for your remote coaching and video review. Very last thing that I wanted to put out there for everyone, if you're listening to this as it's releasing, and then of course if you're listening to this later, it will be sometime in the past, June 2026, Colorado Springs, Colorado. We'll be heading out there with our friend First Sergeant Teddy Esky of Dominate the Drill Pat. His vision was to put out a cadet leaders camp that would be crucial in preparing cadet leaders to do the things like we've been talking about in this podcast. If you're interested and you are returning to your team because you're not graduating and you are a leader or you're hoping to be a leader, check out jrtcdrillteam.com/leaderscamp to learn more about this awesome 4-day experience. And we will hopefully see you out in Colorado Springs, Colorado this summer.